Hello, fellow Kosemenites. It looks like we are turning into the Alien show, but really, over the past week, something happened that I simply couldn't refuse. Okay, you know, everyone dreams of this kind of opportunity when a big international newspaper or TV station emails them and asks for their opinion or even designs. And this is like one of the ultimate things speculative zoology enthusiasts could happen to. And last week it happened to me. The Washington Post called in to ask with the following email by Ben Guarino. He said, "Dear Mr. Kosemen, I'm a science reporter with the Washington Post, and this may be a bit of a shot in the dark, but I'm kicking around an idea for an article about the speculative biology of the alien creature pegged to the sequel of the famous film that opens Friday." He's talking obviously about Alien Covenant. "If you're familiar with the film and would be willing to talk about its biology, how realistic is the alien creature? Given your background in zoology, how does the alien stack up in the realm of real-life parasitoids? Is there anything about this fictional organism's behavior or anatomy that might shed insights on how it evolved, etc., etc.? What do you think about its speculative life cycle?" You see, perfect opportunity to go on the Washington Post. But that weekend, I was away in a different place filming the previous video on this YouTube channel. So I couldn't answer to the email on time, and the article went on without me. Boo-hoo. But, that's the life. At least I missed out on the Washington Post, but I had a chance to film this weird documentary with flowers and snake-like things. Just watch my previous video to find out more about it. So, I couldn't let this one go unanswered. So, I decided to answer this question basically on this YouTube channel. At the same time, my YouTube friend Kelston Hubler wrote to me around the same time as Ben Guarino, and he told me about Dan O'Bannon's initial concept for the xenomorph's origins. And he said, initially in the earliest drafts of the script, the xenomorphs were not mindless predators, but were a sophisticated, intelligent species on their own, with a sprawling culture and civilization on their home planet. They were not a hive-based species with a queen caste or anything, but rather were simply parasitic and needed a third party to fully reproduce. The females would lay a fertilized egg, and then a farmed animal species would be brought in to serve as a host. So in the original script, there were these enormous pyramids and silos full of eggs that basically the intelligent xenomorphs were living in. And this is a slightly more interesting twist on the things than the actual films, because once you get over the initial shock of the chest burster and perhaps some of the scary moments, it's just a pretty much basic wild animal chase. But this initial draft had the civilization basically like the Egyptians. Oops, a friend is calling. Hello, you are on CM Kosemen podcasts.
Hi.
It's my wife again. Timely call.
Hi, I'll call you back, okay?
Okay.
Alright, I love you, bye-bye.
Well, this sounded important. I'll be back in a second. Okay, so it was just a routine checking out on you call. The way it sounded, I thought something was going on, but no. Anyways, what were we saying? Yeah, so initially the alien civilization was planned to be like the ancient Egyptians, you know, perhaps the entire planet or the entire civilization was waiting for another civilization to drop by so they could farm and hatch from them. Basically, they were like a civilization-wide form of the potter wasp. And also, as Kelston writes, there was also a tragedy to the whole creature because these were like somewhat sophisticated creatures and they were more or less civilized. But now only one alien has been born, and he, she, or it is completely devoid of the civilizational nourishment that the wider society would have given it. So it starts attacking and killing people, not because it's inherently vicious, but because it's a lost orphan. It's like, one of those wolf children. And I agree, Kelston, this is a far more interesting script, but I wonder how people would have filmed it. At any rate, the first original Alien turned out the way it turned out, and it's a classic film, and if it was shot this way it would have been another classic film, but hey, we'll get there. But first let's answer Ben Guarino's questions. So aliens, alien parasitoids, and parasite life cycles on Earth. Okay, so let's forget anything else. How realistic do I think the life cycle of the alien is? As far as I was concerned, it was pretty well established and realistic until Prometheus and Alien Covenant turned out. And those two, if we have to accept them, they complicated things really a lot. And especially Prometheus had some really silly parts in it where... So how does this work? There's this black goo that, when given to people, turns them into zombies. But if a zombie person, before turning into a zombie, has sex with them, then his or her child is this kind of gigantic face hugger or whatever. So it was really confusing, and I mean, there was practically no way to square it rationally. Then Alien Covenant came out and ironed things out a bit. So in it, David says that the black goo was basically an accelerant that created berserk mutations on whatever it touched, and it's implied that he stabilized these mutations to create the xenomorphs in their original incarnation. And funny note on the initial Alien, the script, a later draft of the script actually had people turning into alien eggs. If you're an Alien film fan, you probably know this already, but an initial version of the script had the alien life cycle thus: there are the eggs, a facehugger comes out, infects the person, chestburster comes out, grows up into the alien, and then the alien like stings or rapes people and they turn into more eggs, which is like extremely bizarre, and for the reasons I'm about to tell you, extremely lifelike, because this sounds pretty psychotic, but it's the closest I've seen to some of the fucked up stuff real life parasites can do. But obviously we don't live in that universe. So then Aliens came out and introduced the concept of the queen, and it accidentally created an entire Hollywood trope of there being a master alien or a master queen, or even there was this like bad film with dragons, Reign of Fire, and even in that one the dragons are all females, but there's a smaller king dragon that, like, this is a very American, I must dare say, a very Western and American mentality that if you hit the master kill switch, everything is defeated. If you kill the head bad guy, the whole country becomes peaceful and starts selling Frappuccino cafes. But of course, real life isn't that simple. If you kill the bad guy, usually a million other bad guys crop up. And sometimes you would see in desperate hindsight that the bad guy actually had a good purpose to him. But hey, I'm just talking about politics now. Let's go back to the alien. So as I said, until Aliens, the life cycle was pretty stable. We were kind of accepting that the xenomorphs took about the characteristics of their hosts. So in Alien 3, a dog was the host, and a more running doggo alien was shown about. And the three films, it's very rare that you get a trilogy when each film is perfect and each one explores another part of the potential of the medium of the film. But then, of course, you had Alien 4, where back when that movie was made, 1996, cloning was a big thing. Dolly the sheep was just recently cloned, and everyone was going on about clones and DNA. So obviously there had to be this plot device where Ripley's DNA is resurrected. But somehow, when she's cloned, the alien is also cloned with her. And also, for some completely inexplicable reason, her personality and memories come about too. Whereas we know now that if there was some sort of realism to that whole script, you would clone Ripley and you would end up with a kind of diseased child, basically. Which, to credit Alien Resurrection, was explored. You know, there's this famous lab scene where the kill me and all the freaks, and that was actually, each movie has one good scene, in my opinion. This is a good saying. It was a Italian film expert living in Istanbul that said this, that every movie has one good scene, and that was Alien Resurrection's good scene. But again, as I told you before, then we had Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and now things are way more complicated. So a couple of points, if we're talking realism here. In Alien Covenant, there was this scene in which David had somehow populated the planet with these spore casings that look like dogs' testicles, basically. And if someone touches them, they release a kind of puff of smoke and they get a backburster. Now, in those infection scenes, you see the puff of smoke drifting about, and it's assuming very vaguely metallic snowflake-like shapes before entering the person's bloodstream. I realized that those shapes were a lot more mechanical than anything else in the series. So I kind of had this hint that maybe this whole alien juice thing is a kind of nanomachine. It's like a controlled form of the grey goo of sci-fi literature. Grey goo is a sci-fi trope, basically. It's a nanotechnological machine that reproduces itself, and if you drop it to a planet, then the entire planet is converted to grey goo. So that's what it seemed to me in Alien Covenant, that this puffs of smoke, like the initial base element of the alien xenomorph, is actually a nanomachine and nothing lifelike. And I think David was trying to stabilize it, and perhaps the facehugger chestburster loop is a necessary step in the cycle to codify and stabilize this thing, to make a sensible unit out of it as the xenomorph, because otherwise we see it just gives rise to this stupid and unstable mutation, and it's not weaponizable, as one would say. So there's my 5 cents. Maybe the base of this whole thing is a nanomachine, and then David or whoever else made it into a face hugger egg chest burster stage to make it more lifelike and make it more stable, controllable, and basically a experiment that he could replicate. But yeah, these are my ideas about the alien things. I'm personally more interested in the engineers and their world, and I guess we won't get to see them anymore. I really want, by the way, Ridley Scott, I know you're listening to this, mate. I really want an alien engineers movie or a movie cycle. Hey, yeah, Netflix that shit. I would really like become a Netflix member if someone ran an alien engineers series, and it would be basically like Game of Thrones, with good engineers trying to create life and bad engineers trying to destroy it, and some weird alien stuff happening in between. So there, that's my more than 5 cents about the veracity of the Alien series. At the end of the day, my tally is that the xenomorph and the alien creatures, whatever, if you look at them as nanomachines, they're actually extremely plausible. Like, way more plausible than some of the organic aliens that have been proposed in Hollywood. I mean, for Christ's sakes, in that awful film, Sixth Sense, you had aliens that visited Earth, and turns out they were like effervescent. They melted with water. I mean, or like in that other god-awful M. Night Shyamalan film, you had these Ursa, which is like a creature that feeds on fear, but it's actually sent forth to an interplanetary battlefield by another unknown intelligence, and if you remove fear from your life, then fear is a normal reaction, son. And if you can get over your fear, you could defeat the Ursa. I mean, you see, these things, I'm kind of hitting on M. Night Shyamalan here, but just to say, compared to the Xenomorph, even factoring in the recent Prometheus and Alien Covenant films, it's still a fairly realistic alien creature. And the main reason for that is the fucked up thing that real life parasites do on Earth, which I will discuss now on part 2, after singing you this beautiful theme. If you can guess what theme this is and write it on the comments section, I will send you a special gift artwork by email. Okay, are you ready? And we're back with part 2 of our special session on alien and xenomorphs and parasites in wildlife. Thanks extremely to Kelston Hubler and Ben Guarino for their thought-provoking questions again. And now let's talk about real-life parasites. Okay, right off the bat, I have to admit that parasites in real life do far more cruel, weird, bloody, and unpredictable stuff than Hollywood has ever dreamt of. In fact, some of these details we are still discovering and we are still trying to make sense. I mean, I'll give you a very base example, okay? Cancer. Okay, it's not a face hugger or a chest burster. It's not a creature, but it's got so many different types, so many different probable causes, and no one's understood exactly what makes some forms of it tick. I mean, we're battling against it. And what's more alien and horrifying than a part of our own body growing out of our control and smothering us alive, basically. This was somehow alluded to in Alien 3 when Ripley takes a body scan, and there, just like a breast cancer tumor, is the alien queen inside her chest. So I'll be brief about it, and I'll tell you now right away the weirdest, craziest parasite that we have on our planet. Behold the extraordinary life cycle of Pfiesteria piscicida. I will spell this to you as well. Pfiesteria. So this is basically a single-celled amoeba-like motherfucker that lives in brackish waters or ponds or slow-moving rivers. And these guys have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Around 15, if not more, morphs. And up to 4 different distinct life cycles. I mean, if these life cycles were mapped out to an alien creature in a film, the audience would be like, come on, you're exaggerating, what are you saying? No, but it's real. So these guys attack fish mostly, but they exist like kind of things called lobose amoebas on the riverbed or the pond bed. These are like kind of starfish shaped fat amoeba like cells. Now the amoebas, if necessary, can change into these other forms called philios amoebas, which in turn release spores that infect the fish. And when the infected fish dies, the spores, I believe, hatch into these amoebas again. But that's not it. Also, amoebas themselves can attack and kill the fish, and they can create these planozygote spores which turn into cysts that can wait underwater and turn into amoebas later. But then sometimes these cysts can turn into another kind of spore which can give birth to more amoebas, and I guess the amoebas also get to fuck and reproduce sexually. It's just crazy. I mean, I've got a schematic of their life cycle here, and I, believe it or not, couldn't make real sense of it, but it's that complicated. So it's got at least 15 incarnations. So, we were saying in Alien Prometheus, what's the purpose of the deacon alien or this big pussy squid or the zombies? But they're like only 4 morphs. But here we got some motherfucker with 15 morphs, and they're all changing into each other and screwing each other. So it's crazy. Pfiesteria, the hands down, is more alien than Hollywood has ever been able to manage. Then there are other parasites. Obviously, cordyceps, the fungi, is widely known by this date, I believe. So this is a fungus that comes in many varieties, and if it infects insects, spiders, or other arthropods, it basically changes them into this ghostly statue-like and extremely beautiful husks that just spread more spores, and so on and so forth. Now, for each of these animals that I'm going to tell you, let's try to imagine how it would be if this behavior was mapped to a human or a humanoid organism in a film. and the results are extremely scary and unsettling. I mean, one of the biggest driving elements of this alien body horror thing is not the blood or the guts. You know, you could have them in other films. You can have them in slasher films. What makes Alien, and especially Alien Covenant, so scary is this abandonment of personality. So you got characters you know or somewhat know, or at least you come to like in a way or so. Okay? And then these strange things start happening to them, and there's a point in which their characters just fall aside like a discarded cocoon, and it's just very scary. I mean, there were these Aliens comics in the 80s and the 90s that basically they picked up where Aliens, the film, left off before Alien 3 was filmed, okay? And these were really good comics. They don't fit into the Alien Saga storyline now. But one of them was a very famous one. I forgot the name now. But it was about the infection of the Earth by the aliens. And they had these 6 panels, because each subdivided into 2, that showed different snapshots from the alien infection of Earth. And one of them was this old sweet grandma greeting her kids at the airport. Another one was like a family father, like businessman on an airplane reading a newspaper. And another one was something extremely sad. Okay, like a woman on a beach in a vacation somewhere. And this is the also wild tangent, but this is the mastery of comics. So in the next panel, you see all of these characters erupting with these chest bursters, and like the old lady is fallen down and her grandson is crying, and the man on the airplane is like convulsing, and the guy on the next seat is like trying to help him. Same with the woman on the beach. And I mean, these 6 panels, they're like disturbing even to contemplate now. You don't really need bloods and gore, but the fact that something cruel is happening to an unsuspecting innocent person, and then at that moment that person's humanity is being abandoned, and they're like giving birth to or turning into something else. It's even more effective to me than zombie films, because zombies are just zombies. But with these, anyways, it was really poignant. I feel like crying whenever I think about these just 6 panels in that Aliens comic. But coming back to our story with real life parasites, imagine scenarios like this, which each parasite I'm about to tell you. The Pfisteria is so maddeningly complex that I'm just letting that one slip. But so we were just talking about Cordyceps, the insect infecting fungus, and you see like a new movie franchise could come out of each one of these parasites. Cordyceps actually has influenced human narratives. Not a film, but this computer game called The Last of Us, or The Last One of Us. It was for PlayStation. My brother was playing it. So in this game, there are these infected people with cordyceps like things growing out of their heads, and they're like always going, and so they're like zombies in a way. But like imagine some scenario in which imagine it's like a love film with Nicole Kidman or something, but slowly and inevitably her lover is turning into a fungus parasite, and there's nothing they can do about it. That would be extremely worrying. And then on we go with more parasites. I'm sure everyone knows fig wasps, right? So these are really strange. So these guys pollinate figs, okay? They're very small wasps. I mean, smaller than a full stop even. The fig is actually not a fruit. It's something called a syconium. Did you know this? It doesn't have any seeds. It's like this fleshy body with these pustules or like embryonic flowers inside it. So this fig tree needs a fig wasp to pollinate it. But it's not pollination as you and I know. The wasp flies into the fruit through this specially designed opening. It's known as an ostiole. Okay? So she comes to the fruit flying, then she has to wriggle into it. But in doing so, she rips her own wings out. And then inside, she lays her own eggs into some of the flowers inside the fleshy fruit. Now, those eggs hatch. In fact, the fig has special structures to hold them. Those eggs hatch, okay? And first the males come out. The males look nothing like the female wasps. They have small eyes. They have this retarded looking but very sharp scissor-like mouth parts. And they have no wings. They're like semi grub-like even. So they find the female eggs, they help open them, and then shag their own sisters. And like let that sink in for a while. And remember, this is all happening into the fleshy meat fruit plant paradise of the confines of a fig. And then the incestuous dweeby brothers go out and shag their sisters. The sisters collect pollen inside the fig, okay? And then escape, covered with pollen from their birthplace. And then the cycle begins again. As they enter another fig, they're fertilized by their brother's incestuous sperm, by the way. As they enter another fig, they carry the pollen from the first fig they were born in, and then both the fig and the insect. It's a circle. It's a circle of life. And incest. And insects. Haha, that rhymes. But it's like very weird. What kind of a film could we make out of this? I think this is so bizarre that it can't be a horror film anymore. It would have to be like this 2003 extremely rapid drug film called Spun. Look at this, S-P-U-N. So this film was this kind of non-stop and kind of banal extravaganza of like these characters like running around with high contrast color correction, and the frame rate is pretty fast too, and everyone takes drugs, and like everyone's going around fucking and taking drugs and killing and whatever. So if you have to make the fig wasps into a film, it would have to be like this. So imagine, can you even imagine that maybe there's a kind of building that's organic, but as soon as people go in there, they start shagging, and like one character is so mean and nasty. These are all human biases, by the way, but they're what we grow up with. So yeah, one character is so screwed up that he shags his own cousin inside this flesh house, which is like this wine giant breasts. And if this was a film, I would have H.R. Giger design the building. So it's like there's like these penis or vagina like things coming out of every wall, and maybe the house itself is making these moaning sounds, and the males kind of shag their own sisters, and then they shag these holes in the wall. They're like glory holes, imagine. And then the freaking house gets pregnant from the glory holes and gives birth to these weird, like semi-human but still like disgustingly sexually appealing house children. And then the lead character goes and has sex with them too, and then they go out to the world to spread sex and house fucking madness to all over the planet. That's just from the Fig Wasp, huh? There are two other films that this can relate to, by the way. One of them is actually an extremely close relation. It's Shivers by David Cronenberg. I think David Cronenberg is on to some of these biological facts, and this helps him write these extremely unsettling narratives. But in Shivers, this professor who's living in this like snobby high-rise creates this sex parasite and infects everyone with it, and everyone in the apartment turns into sex zombies, and they go out to infect society at the end, basically. So you see, that's a bit like the unspeakable scenario I just described. That's really actually advanced. I mean, biologically speaking, David Cronenberg really knows his game. Another film that one could liken to this weird Fig scenario I just described is... I conveniently forgot the title. Let me take a sip of my coffee and maybe I can remember. What was it? I can't remember. But hey, we made our own film anyways. By the way, Hollywood, master of Hollywood, I know you're out there, you're listening to me, and if you want an advanced copy of any of these scripts, by making these videos, I'm just copywriting these mofos left and right. So if you want to turn these into films, you have to pay me $100,000. How about that? Anyways, let's go on. Cordyceps we described. Fig wasps we described. Let's talk about the Lancet river fluke. I'm sure if you're interested in biology, you guys know this too. So this is the kind of fluke that infects cows, snails, and ants, and ultimately, if you're not careful, people. But people are not a final host, so it's a dead end for them. But anyways, so these guys, they start out in these eggs shed in cow poo, and snails really like to eat cow poo, and so they get the spores. Now, there are other parasites that do weird things to snails, but these aren't them. So the snails release the intermediate spores in their slime, and the ants eat the slime and the spores, and this is where the strange stuff begins. So the Lancet river fluke, its scientific name is Dicrocoelium dendriticum. Okay, this guy takes control of the ant. He hijacks it and makes it climb like a zombie on top of a very tall structure, a blade of grass, and makes it wait there forever until it's eaten by a grazing cow, and the whole cycle begins again. Pretty strange, huh? Now let's imagine how this would be with people. So you need a alien parasite that basically infects a person, but let's not be as crude to imagine zombies or attacking other people. These have been done before. In fact, let's assume that the infected person, I don't know, jumps into the sea and drowns. I don't know. And then the people who swim there. Okay, I got the script. This time it's an Indian film, okay? I'm sure this is a very horribly stereotypical music, but I'm sorry. But anyway, so this has taken place in the banks of the holy river Ganges in India, okay? Ganges is actually venerated as a god or a goddess in Indian culture, and it's a pilgrimage site for tens of millions of Indian people, and it's also one of the most polluted rivers in the world. It's full of, like, I don't know, chemical waste, plastic runoff, fuel waste, anything you name. But the people still take these curative baths in it. They deposit the ashes of their dead in it. They even deposit the dead themselves. So it's crowded with all kinds of things you don't want on you, but people still go into it because of a religious conviction. And possibly, you know, if someone's doing this for a number of years, they become immune to these poisons, so they keep on doing it. So let's imagine this Lancet River Fluke film in India. So it's like chori chori boom, boom, boom. But in the Ganges we also have another animal, the Ganges river dolphin. This is a real thing, by the way. I'm not making this up. It looks like an Alien movies style xenomorph with a battery of sharp teeth, a smooth forehead, and no eyes. It really resembles it in a way. So some sort of parasite comes about in this film. And okay, let's not have this a traumatic film, but the parasite is somehow born out of the Ganges river dolphin as it is about to go extinct. And it infects people who are doing these ritual baths in the river. And because it's an Indian film, it has them do this massively coordinated 2,000 person dance number, splashing about in the river, and they're all going like dancing in the river. And as people are dancing, these parasites are harmlessly but weirdly coming out of their arms and eyes and going into the river to their final host, the river dolphin, and infecting more people on the way. And everyone who's infected also starts dancing, and the whole river Ganges becomes a enormous petrochemically polluted parasite driven zombie dance stage. But you know, this is a good film. Nobody dies in it. People just dance a lot and just worms come out of their eyes or stuff, but nobody dies. That's actually also more realistic, because in real life, like, the best parasites don't kill their hosts. They may trouble them somehow, somewhat, but if you kill them, you take the host out of the action. So, sustainable use of hosts. And that was the not the Ganges river dolphin, the Lancet river fluke. Also, flatworms infect snails too, and this gives rise to a very famous other form of parasite. I'm sure some of you may have seen these snails with these throbbing worms inside their eyes, okay? So this parasite starts out in the river. It infects a frog, which is eaten by a bird, and it comes out as an adult in the bird's poop, goes into the snail again, and it gives these. It actually matures inside the snail. It migrates to the snail's eye stalks. It takes about these fat, green, lollipoppy, throbbing form, so that the snail is not only blinded, but it's also more visually attractive to the next host, which is the frog. So the frog eats it, and the circle of life starts again. Hum ba ya hum ba 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 bye, hum ba ya hum ba 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 bye, hum ba ya hum ba ba bye. Okay, now how do you think this eye-infecting flatworm parasite could be adapted to a movie? Let's think about it. We want some sort of grotesque change that somehow makes the person desirable for their next host, and we want to apply this to people. Well, it's gonna be easy, but maybe it could give this female character this really big, firm boobs, and then the next host is the man, of course, because he oogles it and like rubber boats it, whatever, and then from him, I figured out the life cycle. So this film is an American Pie style comedy with horror inflections. It's like Money Hands, the adventures of a parasite generation, or something like this. So it begins this way. The parasite is spread by dollar bills, okay? Like this Benjamins and stuff. And a stripper girl gets the dollar bills. The parasite causes her to have extremely large and alluring breasts. Not too big, but, just big enough to cup and bury your face in. And then she's like, wow, Cassidy, what's happening to you? And she's like, I've become the top girl in this club. And she gets all these clients, and everyone's like, all these guys are like, can I touch it, please, or something. And they sleep with her, maybe, bury their face. And then from her breasts, they go to the man's hands, okay? And then, because in this subcultural life cycle, men touch more money because they're turning more tricks and closing deals and selling dope or whatever. So somehow the parasite is only localized in the hands of a male human being. So he cups the girl's breasts and he's like, wow. And then he becomes like super adrenaline activated. So he becomes better at hustling and gets more dollar bills. And from the dollar bills, he goes to another strip club and makes it rain on another stripper girl. And then she gets these really nice cup size C's. And then, it's just this kind of... I imagine this film to be like, I don't know, Spring Breakers or American Pie or something more light. But at the end of it, there's a second life cycle, and these inflated breasts, okay, this poor stripper girl or whatever, the inflated breasts ooze out of her breasts like in one deft move, like a burst implant, and they reveal themselves as these jellyfish-like creatures, and they crawl away into the toilet, and this is the Medusa stage. So they go to the water mains and infect another city. So the entire city will be crawling with big boobed women, money dealing fast boys, and low level gangster crime. Anyways, Actually, a lot of these parasite stories, as I told you before, because of this element of loss of humanity and basically death, grief, and bad body image destruction, they're really awful affairs, but I want my films to be happy films. I already have enough unhappy shit in life as it is. So, now we come to the final bits of my parasite selection. So the parasite that's most similar to the alien creatures is actually something called a potter wasp, family Eumeninae. That's E-U-M-E-N-E. No, wait. Potter wasps. Are you ready? Spelling bee for the name of the wasp. I got you there, pundits. Anyways, E-U-M-E-N-I-N-A-E. Eumeninae. And these are like really spectacular looking insects. They look like these flying centaur motorcycle, like really amazing animals. But the way they reproduce is really awful. They sting this caterpillar or spider or whatever. They carry it. By the way, when it's stung, the animal is only paralyzed. The metabolic functions keep going, but it's like completely and irrevocably paralyzed. And then the wasp lays an eggs in them. But this is not all. You know, right here we have the life cycle of the alien film already. But after laying the egg, the wasp builds this clay nest around the paralyzed victim. And in most cases, this nest is very intricate and it looks as if there's some real architecture involved with the planning. They look really beautiful, organic, but also planned, with a gate and walls and a front and back end. And inside this house of despair, the victim lies motionless until the larva comes out of it. And the larva is really smart, so it starts by eating the non-vital bits first. So the victim keeps fresh for a longer period of time. And it devours it and then metamorphoses into a fully developed wasp before breaking the nest out and flying away. Do search for all kinds of parasite wasps, gall wasps, and wasp reproduction in general, and it's extremely moribund. And I've always felt a perverse sympathy for these potter wasps, because in my childhood, in our summer place, I used to find them all the time, and I would see the wasps building the nests, and I was a mischievous kid, so I would break the nest open, but inside was a spider. How could that be? A wasp's building the nest, but spiders coming out of it. It took me like years to figure this out, because the spider species would be different. And sometimes we would have the nest full of, like, I don't know, 2 spiders and a grub or something like this. So they would stock up the larder, I couldn't get my head around it. Like, I would try, why is he doing this? Are they like food, or are they hibernating? Or maybe is it a communal endeavor? But I would never find a wasp in it. But then I learned the truth. I was red-pilled about the wasps, and everything fit into place. And of course, this is really scary. Now we can have a solid horror film about this. It would be like one of those survival horror films that millennials so like to be afraid of. There's this genre. Did you realize that there was this film, Green Hell? The recent one, not the old one. Like, there's this one horror film where these like forest exploration kids are left out in a jungle and a tribe of cannibals is hunting them. There's another film, what's it? No Escape, which is like this first world horror, first world problems. First world horror is now a valid film genre, ladies and gentlemen. So in No Escape, the lead character and his family are expat Westerners, and they're trapped in Thailand at a time of violent revolution, and there's these like dangerous guerrillas that kill all the foreigners they can find, and it's like first world horror, just like that forest film. There's like other people who are not as lucky as us out to kill us. Oh my god. And this actually reveals a conceit that, things like this have happened before, but come on, first world people, not everyone wants to kill you. Not every foreigner is out there to kill you. They have their own grievances to settle, that's for sure. But, it was so ridiculous, this goddamn No Escape. And what's the name of this actor who is always in comedy films? But I have a strong case of name drop today. Not Vince Vaughn, the blonde guy from, I forgot his name, but he's all like Meet the Fockers and all sorts of family comedies. He's a good actor. So he's in it, and my wife was so scared of this film, she was actually hyperventilating like a little fat dog next to me. Wow, come on. So my film based on the Potter Wasp would be a bit like this. It would be called Tapui. And it would be something like these films, and also like Cabin in the Woods, but with some sort of jungle elements thrown in and whatever. So the film is called Tepui. That's Tepui. And Tepui is this unique Mesoamerican land formation. Basically, it's this extremely steep, rectangular highland that's like an island in the sky, and it's full of jungle. And these structures are some of the least explored jungle patches on the planet because they're inaccessible, basically. So in our film, these young, like hipster type, these kind of Instagram girls that like to pose around on beaches with, there's this extremely stock shot that is like this wild explorer girl in shorts and a cowboy hat leading some dude who's holding the camera from his hand. You get this idea? Let's have adventures, or there's some other strange girly message written on the pictures. So it's like these kind of people, let's have adventures, and they're like this kind of rich bourgeois bohemian types, and they hire a helicopter ride to this Tepui, and it's like, wow, we're exploring a place we've never seen before. And with them there's this more like seasoned Sam Neill type guy. He was like, I'm just in it for your money, you rich brats. And they go into the Tepui and they find all these mud huts. That's my impression of a tropical mystery theme. But they go there, but there's all these mud huts that are so primitive looking that, obviously it seems like somebody built them, but it's... And in each hut, there's this weird thing that looks like a mummy. But it's a human mummy. It's nothing inhuman, These are like legit dead people, or sometimes monkeys, or sometimes even things like dogs and bears that have been built, that have been encased in these huts. And the kids are like, wow, that's cool. I've never seen anything like that before. They're like Instagramming the shit out of them. And there's like this even kind of snotty tech kid who's brought this satellite modem along so they can upload their stuff. And they're exploring this place basically. Now with them there's this trained biologist, and he's like, I'm not liking the sound of this. But suddenly one night, this dead body that they found in the huts, no, skip that. One night one of the crew goes missing, and they find her sleeping in one of these mud huts next to the mummy. But they can't wake her up, and they're like, Cheryl, wake up. And then she doesn't wake up. She's like the sleeping beauty. And of course they like try to medevac her or whatever. But then just as they're waiting for the helicopter, all the other dead mummies and animals inside the huts start hatching, and what comes out is this something like Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. So they're like these long-headed, human-like creatures that are so weird. You see, they resemble people, but in the same way the giant cockroaches in the movie Mimic resembled people. So they're like giant flying insectoids that mimic people, but they basically trap people and put them in these mud huts. And at the end, the imprisoned woman also has one of these things come out of her, a bit like Alien, obviously, and that's a horror film for you. Heck, I remember me and a film director friend here in Istanbul, we just were betting ideas back and forth, and one of our ideas was somehow similar. So it's about these parthenogenetic wasp women that are extremely sexy, and they're like very slutty looking, and they tease all these extremely macho wife beater type douchebags basically. This is a stereotypical character in Turkish culture. We call them kro or maganda or chomar. So these wasp women, they dress in the skankiest, like, you know, this cheap call girl escort lady get up, and they find these weird men who are like horny wife beaters, and they sting them. The men go to sleep, they don't remember anything, but in our minds the film was basically an increasing tempo intercut of two events. One, a man meets one of these wasp women, and at the end, at the crescendo of the scene, she reveals herself to be an inhuman stinger lady, and like stings this guy in the belly or something, and he faints. Good riddance. And then the second crescendo is the same guy actually, but he's looking very sick and kind of like has a swollen liver, and he's waiting for his spot at one of these dysfunctional state hospitals, and he's like, I can't take it anymore, doctor, please look at me, or whatever. And then at the end of it, at the crescendo of that scene, you see like basically his liver exploding and a wasp woman embryo coming out of him. And our idea was to intercut these two scenes one by one, stanza by stanza, so it rhymes, you know, like poetry. But no, like you see like 10 seconds of one scene, 10 seconds of the other scene, and when both scenes simultaneously reach their climax, you would see what was going on and everything fits into place. And it would also be this snarky gender commentary in Turkish culture. So that's another story I wrote, actually. We talked about it with my friends. Oop, phone ringing again. Oh, it's my dad calling. Just 1 second. I'll be right back. Wow. So it turns out that there was a subway construction collapse in one of the busy streets, and he was just checking out to see if I was okay. Paternal reflex. But yeah, that's life in this interesting city for you. But anyways, back to Parasites and movies. So that there were my two films derived from the life cycle of the Potter wasp. And then there's also another animal that's really dear to my heart. It's not really a parasite, but it's like extremely fun to imagine them in a human modality. So these are the trap nest spiders, Ctenizidae, or yeah, Ctenizidae. Okay, so these guys basically are your tunnel web spiders or funnel web spiders, and one subfamily among them builds something like a sock that's connected to their burrow. And he just waits inside the sock until a hapless insect walks over it. And then he like stabs the insect through the sock of webbing and just drinks their bodily juices. So I'm not going to imagine a whole film scenario for this guy, but it's just really like dehumanized and ridiculous. Imagine like something like a phone booth, and there's this kind of cloaked stranger inside it, and you go up to it, it's like, hey buddy, you're gonna hold it up the whole day, come on. And then he just whoosh, stabs you with a ninja sword, but it's actually connected to his teeth, and it's a giant fang. And all these things ever do is to sit in this room and wait for someone to pass until they can stab them. Pretty. That's an idea for a nice short movie. If you're okay, I hold the copyrights for all the funky movies I'm making up in this show, but this one I'm giving it away. If any of you are film students, go ahead, film this shit. I'd love to see it. The kind of trapdoor. And there could be many varieties of this. You could have this kind of antisocial alien sitting in a public toilet waiting for someone to come up so that they can kill them. Or you could have a naughty variety with a glory hole in a kind of seedy sex club. Or things like this, you know. So we come to the final part of this long and funny podcast. From aliens to parasites, we've come a long way. But now we have to visit an old friend again. Because the more I make up these kind of the more I make up these kinds of stories, the more you followers want to hear my versions of films. So we're going to now the master of Hollywood. And then the master of Hollywood is like, C.M. Kosemen. I said, yes, God. I want you to make Alien all over again. And I'm taking you back to 1974. And you can have all the money in the world. And you can have all the actors and the actresses. And you can have all the talents you wish. Anything under the sun. It is my duty, my son, for you to make Alien as you see fit. And I said, yes, master, I will do as you command. And so my version of Alien. Imagine, if you will, it will be set not in a spaceship, but actually on a planet. And it would be the planet of the engineers. The story goes that this is mankind's first faster-than-light mission to another planet. Okay? And they've been getting signals from a certain planet which actually showed them how to assemble a DIY hyperspace jumping device. So it's this kind of first voyage of discovery, and there's a kind of UN-like crew. By the way, they sent robot probes before, and it shows a planet. It's inhabited by like strangely humanoid creatures. These are the engineers from Prometheus, basically. But now it's the time to send a human crew. And in the first third of the film, we're introduced to our crew, and like there's some character development. I'm not really good with writing these kinds, so using the unlimited budget given to me by the god of Hollywood, I would just invite over some really good writers to develop these characters. There are no androids. They just land on this planet, but then strange stuff begins to happen. They kind of had the idea that the civilization on this planet was something like 2 million years old, okay? So it was a very stable, sustainable, I love this word, and old, ancient civilization. And they're right. They get exactly what they bargained for. Except they don't realize that a sustainable civilization that's lasted for 2 million years has left no space for humanity as we know it. The people who live there, they're like complete automatons to such a level that they would make 1984 look like the Burning Man festival. So they land on this planet, and the first thing they realize that people there have no intelligence. They're like, they don't even register. They just go from these arcane looking organic buildings. Their technology is so old that everything is so efficient that everything looks kind of molten and organic looking. And at this point I would hire, of course, the old late Sir H.R. Giger to design all the buildings, accessories. But they realize that some things are kind of off with this planet. Like, the citizens have these kind of buildings, but there are lots of dead ends and buildings that don't seem to serve any function. These gigantic cathedral-like buildings that these people go to like zombies, but all they do is like cast some stones from pit A to pit B, and then next week they reverse it or something. And they all like kind of collect these strange metal chips and spend them for these like amorphous strange objects. And they go into these weird factories, and they see that the factories there are kind of automated things that randomly produce these kind of mismatched abortion like products that don't serve any purpose. So you see all these surreal landscapes, and then the scary parts begin. And until this point, by the way, my main source of reference is this amazing book, Eden, by Stanislav Lem. And in the book, the characters also land on an alien planet that's so civilized that it has no room for the individual being as an agent. So everything is kind of running on automatic, and some factories are out of control. And there are factories that make dead bodies, but somehow the bodies have deformations because the production cycle has just not been checked, So in our film, the scary bits begin this way, They go into this kind of weird temple-like place, and they see that they are making people in there. But the people are like 1 out of every 5 that come out from the conveyor belt are deformed. They're like one eye or like 2 faces meshed together, or like some bunch of bones protruding out of the mouth, or no legs, and they see all these freaks being born and then mercilessly being hacked apart by these weird killer people who are specialized for their task. Their only purpose is to kill the misfits. And then, because our crew doesn't really fit into this planet, a kind of killer caste is activated. So these cities, I told you, they're a bit like these like immense organic skyscrapers, and everyone just has one room to live in. And in a special kind of room, a killer is awakened, and their only purpose is to find and destroy these people who are breaking the cycle of the eternal city, basically. So a big chase scene ensues. Our heroes push one of the regular proles to the path of the killer, and in a very disturbing scene, the killer hacks that innocent victim apart, but nobody around the city pays any attention. And you have these scenes from contemporary China that someone's getting squashed under a car and no one goes out of their way to help. So these kind of, again, I told you about this a long time ago, this abandonment of humanity takes place, and they're all like, yeah, we gotta get out of this place. But they get back to their ship and they see their ship has been infected with these kind of honeycomb building killer wasp people. And then what happens is that, like, our characters are hunted down one by one form of ultra specialized mindless person or another, until something happens where only two lovers remain. And in a selfish twist of fate, things come to such a point that basically our hero abandons his lover in the escape pod so that he can escape. I mean, it's either he escapes or they both die. And he chooses to act selfishly, and then he leaves the strange engineer insect planet behind, and he's haunted by survivor guilt. Na, na, na. Na, 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 na. Anyways, this is how I would film Alien. And that's that. I think Alien's a cool film. It's got a surprising level of realism when compared to other Hollywood films. But there are parasites on our own Earth that are so weird that each of them could have a whole movie universe based on their life cycle. And at the end, I think all of this fear comes not from like icky parasites or blood or whatever, but it comes from an abandonment of humanity and hyper specialization. And guess what? These things are happening in our cities in this very day, in the developing world. Sure, we aren't turning into insects or something, but all these words are kind of like chewing gums in everybody's mouth. Sustainability, technology, automation. What's their logical conclusion? This fucking shit is the logical conclusion. Abandonment of humanity, which is so powerful a driving force in body horror films such as Alien, zombie films or whatever, is happening right now. I mean, jobs, forget about computer automation or whatever. Jobs are being sequestered to such a level that it's now a career to be a certain type of medical technician or an automotive technician or whatever. And people, I'm seeing this like a plague in developed countries. People are becoming so ungeneralized that when compared to troubled or developing countries like Turkey, I mean, yeah, they got better standards of living. It's a huge yeah, by the way. But also, the kind of mentality is becoming so specialized that certain people in certain jobs can't even conceptualize doing things in other fields without paying money. It's scary, man. Scarier than all the parasites I've just told you about. But anyways, those are just my strange opinions. And thank you for bearing with me. Please like my videos, share my videos, and comment if you have any similar ideas for parasites or parasite-related stories. Please let me know. If you're really enjoying me telling stories this way, I'm really considering just reading my own fan fiction as podcasts these days. So if you're into that kind of stuff, let me know. And as always, have a nice day, everyone. This is CM Kosemen signing out. And no, my next post won't be about the goddamn Alien franchise, I promise you. Cheers and have a nice day.